Hi. So it looks like participants wise, we have most people here. Hopefully people have come back so we can start this session. It's difficult to tell when there aren't cameras and things. So okay, so welcome back everyone, and in this session we will have a number of different presentations. So we will be hearing from colleagues at Jisc, and we will also have a presentation from Christy Walker and Thomas Cridford from the Royal College of Art, and Matt Greenhall from the University of Liverpool, and then we will also be joined by researchers Claire Brock from the University of Leicester, and Joanna Page from the University of Cambridge. So I think now it's time to hear from Caroline McKay and Anna Hughes from Jisc.
Yes, I'll just wait for my slides to pop up. But yes, I'm a licensing manager at Jisc, and I'll speak a bit about what we've been doing at Jisc towards the implementation of the policy for monographs and our plans going forward. And then I'll pass over to my colleague Anna Hughes, who will speak about the engagement work that we've been doing.
Jisc slides. Sorry, Anna, we'll be with you in a moment. We're just struggling to find the slides.
Oh dear.
2 seconds and then we'll be with you.
Okay, just to fill the time, I've noticed there's been quite a few questions about Diamond open access models in the questions, so hopefully my talk will cover most of those questions. Okay, so now, can I drive these slides?
Have a little box down.
Yes, I do. Right, okay, here we go. So, so at Jisc, we're rapidly scaling up sustainable, affordable open access arrangements. We're gathering and analysing data to monitor and evaluate the performance of open access arrangements to enable all parties to understand the progress and impact. We're providing tools for authors and research organisations to navigate open access. This will enable all parties to develop an understanding of the challenges of open access, to share and develop best practice, to deliver support via tools and guidance and publishing options in readiness for the commencement of the UKRI Open Access Monographs policy. So there are a few ways available to authors to publish their monographs open access. The book processing charge, or BPC, which will publish your book immediately open access, so will be compliant. UKRI will fund the BPC to their maximum funding level, as we've heard. BPCs, while easy to understand, are expensive and unsustainable in a wholesale move to open access. Diamond open access is an alternative to the BPC, and it means free to read, free to publish. These agreements are financially supported by libraries and institutions. There's a couple of different models. Purchase to open, which is similar to the subscribe to open in the journals field. So the library supports and gains access to paywalled content on a leased or a perpetual basis. So they've got something tangible in return for their support. Funding supports immediate OA publication of new content. Library supporter memberships are offered by Born OA presses, and the financial support allows publication of new OA content. Other models available include Flip It Open, and this model is being piloted by Cambridge University Press. The book title is published behind a paywall. Once the funding target has been met, the book will flip to OA. It's worth noting that there's no guarantee that this will happen within 12 months, leaving a UKRI author potentially non-compliant. Green self-archiving. Many publishers allow the self-archiving of one chapter within 12 months, which will be UKRI compliant. Other publishers have a longer embargo period currently, but some have verbally advised us that they will make an exception for UKRI authors. The self-archiving of whole books is not offered by many publishers at all, and certainly not within 12 months of publication. Our approach at Jisc is to negotiate diamond agreements as agreed with our sector strategic groups. This will maximise the funding available to create inclusive agreements that are affordable and accessible to more institutions. I thought it would be useful to give you an overview of a few of the diamond agreements that we have already negotiated and which are shown here grouped into purchase to open models and library supporter membership models. So looking at the purchase to open column, MIT Press, for example, provides term time leased access to their entire back file of books of around 2,000. For 2022 and 2023, their entire front file of around 80 books per year has been published open access. Based on institution size, the largest institutions would pay just under $6,500 per year to support both the HSS and STEM collections. There are two Opening the Future models operated by Central European University Press and Liverpool University Press. Libraries support for 3 years, at the end of which they own the backfile content in their chosen collection in perpetuity. CEUP offer 4 collections, each at a maximum of £1,000 per annum, and have already published 18 books open access under this scheme, with a further 3 in production. On the library membership side, Open Book Publishers requires support in the amount of £700 per annum. University of Westminster Press, with their Cultural China series, just over £2,000 per annum. If your institution supports any of these diamond agreements, and if one of your UKRI funded authors is published under the Diamond Initiative, the library can claim back their supporter fee from the UKRI Ring-Fence Fund. We believe that this will go a long way towards encouraging more libraries to support diamond agreements and create a thriving alternative to the BPC. So what can you do within your institutions? Authors, talk to your publisher about how you will publish compliantly. Ask if they offer alternatives to the BPC. And if so, ask if your library supports their Diamond Initiative. And if not, recommend that they do. Libraries, how can your current institutional budget support diamond agreements, noting that they will be based on subject collections? If your UKRI funded author is published via a Diamond Initiative, you can reclaim your supporting fee from the Ring-Fence Fund. Research Management Team, familiarise yourself with the UKRI procedures for applying to monograph funding, and publicise the policy and your procedures internally so that researchers are aware. Our Sherpa services allow authors and institutions to make informed and confident decisions in open access publication and compliance. We're currently redeveloping our Sherpa services to combine all 4 current services and our transitional agreement lookup tool into a single platform. The new platform allows our users access to our services in one location and has been rebuilt, allowing considerations for future tools. Sherpa for Books is part of the existing Sherpa UI enhancement project and is in the discovery early develop phase. The new Sherpa UI has a placeholder for Sherpa for Books.
Oh, thanks very much, Caroline. Sorry, just
Sorry,
you there.
I go over 2 then? Hang on, let's go back. Oh no, sorry,
No, can you just move it forward 1, please?
Yeah, sorry, I've just got a few more words to say.
Oh, sorry.
So the development of the new Sherpa service between October and December this year, we will deliver the data model to enable the development of the service, and this work is already complete. Develop the UX, complete a survey to collect publisher OA monograph policy data, create the prototype OA book feature in Sherpa, enter the data into the service. The data itself will be contained in a content management system called Directors, and to complete the user acceptance testing. We will release a beta of this feature in January 2024 to coincide with the policy launch. And now over to Anna. I'll drive your slides.
Oh, thank you. Sorry for interrupting. So thanks so much, Caroline. So I'm going to give hopefully just a really brief update on our engagement activities to date and how we're working with the HE sector and UKRI to support the monographs policy. So we've scaled up our engagement with all key stakeholder groups, so our members, research organisations, publishers, funders, and of course libraries and research support offices. So we've done this through a series of roundtables, workshops and webinars, and this has really allowed us to surface the pain points that are being experienced and understand the barriers and challenges and discuss and develop solutions. So Caroline has obviously talked about our negotiations, open access agreements and the tools, but we've also shared and developed best practice, delivered advice and practical support. So on the slide on the screen now, you can see it. There's a brief snapshot of some of the resources we've been involved with creating, and these are specifically ones that can be used to support the monographs policy. So hot off the press, it's just been published today, is the new guide to publishing under the open access policy, copyright and Creative Commons licenses. It really complements the recent UKRI good practice guide around managing third-party copyright. If you're on any of the Jisc mail lists, you might have received an email this morning about it, but please check that out. The Open Access Books Toolkit, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. It's a toolkit to help book authors better understand open access book publishing. So Jisc sit on the editorial advisory board, and this also includes representations from publishers, institutions, infrastructure providers, so you get a real a holistic viewpoint. I'll just move on to, because we're a bit short of time, I'll just move on to these series of short guides mentioned on that slide. So we've recently published 12 and one-page resources that cover key parts of the UKRI policy. This includes explanations of like the different routes to compliance. There's been quite a few questions around that in the Q&A, so check those out and I might answer some of your questions. And also there's ones about more general open access concepts and platforms. So for example, tools like DOAJ and Sherpa. So yeah, we've published 12 so far, and there'll be more coming before the end of the year. We're using them in our conversations with publishers, but they could also be used as a training resource for research support staff. And of course, when you're having conversations with funded researchers. They're free to download and share, and I was really pleased to see that the University of Swansea has embedded the rights retention one onto their research publications policy webpage, so that's fantastic to see. We're also developing a series of briefings for senior figures at institutions. You know, we understand from feedback that it's often quite difficult for librarians to have those upward conversations around supporting different publishing models, and so we're reaching out to finance and library directors with a series of recommendations. This will hopefully ensure that researchers with UKRI funding have a range of compliant publication options to choose from, and that obviously their research can be maximised and reach the widest possible audience. Next slide, please, Caroline. Thank you. So we've got a number of channels that we use to reach out to our members to share information and maintain an active dialogue. Hopefully you're familiar with most of them, but I'll just do a quick run through. So many of you, I recognise lots of names on this call, so many of you are members of our digital research community group. Membership is open to anyone involved in HE research, so researchers, repository managers, librarians, research office staff. It's a really good platform for peer-to-peer engagement, and members can use it to share ideas and information, discuss like what's happening in their institution and suggest solutions. So within that group, we have a dedicated open access policy channel, within the team site. I mean, we do appreciate that there are like some limitations with teams. You know, I know lots of people have difficulty switching between instances, and we've recently rolled out multi-factor authentication, which has added an extra layer of security. So we are exploring other platforms, so watch this space. But in the meantime, we make sure that we share key information via the digital research community Jisc mail list as well. So obviously that can be used for information sharing, but it can also be used for conversation and supporting each other. We organise regular webinars via the digital research community, and these are on key issues and topics related to the UKRI policy. So these are very much community-driven webinars, and we welcome suggestions or requests for topics and speakers. We make sure that the speakers come from all sectors, so libraries, publishers, infrastructure providers, We want to make sure that everyone's got a voice and an opportunity to speak and share their views and experiences. So on the slide that's on the screen now, you'll just see the 2 recent webinar series we organised around monographs. We reached nearly 2,000 people via these, and the feedback was that the speakers provided practical support and information that could be taken back and implemented at institutions. So that's exactly the sort of impact we're looking for. So that was great to hear. And another reason to join the digital research community team site is that all the resources from our webinars are saved on there. So if you miss it or you forget to sign up, all the YouTube links and the resources will be on there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So obviously the monographs policy goes live on the 1st of January, and we'll move into the implementation phase. So we really want to sort of continue hearing from you. We welcome all ideas and feedback. So as I said, please join the conversation on the digital research community, just to make sure you don't miss any information around the work we're doing. All the content we produce, so blog posts, news features, resources, guides, we push those out using the channels that I mentioned on the previous slide, and the slides will be shared, so you'll be able to get all the links there. Please follow Jisc on social media. The platforms we're most active on are X, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So there is a rumour we might be starting a TikTok account. So again, watch that space. And of course, there's good old-fashioned email. I'm happy to be contacted directly, either via email or Teams, if that suits you better. If you want to contact any of the other Jisc teams involved in the project, so the licensing team or the Sherpa team, then please use that email on the slide and it'll get through to them. So many thanks for listening, and there'll be opportunities to ask questions at the Q&A after lunch.
Thank you very much, Caroline and Anna. So I think we should move on to hear from our colleagues at the Royal College of Art. So Christy and Thomas, over to you.
Rachel. So I'm waiting for Tom, hopefully, to join and turn on his camera, but I'll go ahead and start.
Christy, sorry, I am here. I'm just not appearing on the...
That's okay. So I'm Christy Walker. I'm the head of research development at the Royal College of Art. And my colleague Tom, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tom Cridford. I'm the Scholar Communications Librarian at the RCA.
So just a quick background of the RCA. We are a specialist art and design institution that's postgraduate only, and we're spread across 3 different campuses in London. We have 4 schools and 4 research centres that do a lot of interdisciplinary research. We have a lot of people working at that boundary between design and STEM, for example. But we also, of course, have a lot of people doing practice research and people who do not publish, which can be a bit of a challenge at times. So open access at the RCA is jointly managed by the library and the Research and Knowledge Exchange Office. So basically Tom and me, we are the people that manage the OA process. Practice outputs are predominant at the RCA. For example, 2/3 of the RCA's rough 2021 outputs were out of scope of the open access requirements. And of those that were in scope, they were mainly journal articles with some book chapters and long form publications. Our current RCA open access policy was written in 2019 and reflects the existing rough requirements and those of non-textual practice-based physical research. We know that this needs to be updated, and it's something that Tom and I need to work on. Over to you, Tom.
Yeah, so in terms of training and support for open access, a lot of that falls into my remit as a scholar communications librarian and as part of the library team. Traditionally, I think a lot of our support and training has focused more heavily on things like articles and conference proceedings, even though, as Christy says, we do have other kinds of outputs that are being generated at the college. And that's largely due to the fact that existing REF and UKRI policies have focused on those kind of outputs. But it is worth saying that we've always had other kinds of outputs in mind, and we include them in our conversations and our policy and the guidance that we produce. In terms of increasing the focus on long-form open access, we're doing this in a number of ways. So as most institutions do, we have a set of policy pages which on our intranet, which also contain kind of general guidance on all aspects of open access, and long-form publication is an element of that which we're trying to add to, and which researchers can access at any time. We're also trying to raise awareness through talks with individuals, but also by attending meetings within schools, the research centres, and within the different departments within the college. This year, I am running a set of monthly open research sort of drop-in sessions, kind of workshops, which involve 20-minute, half-an-hour presentation on lots of different elements of open research, and long-form open access is one of those kind of topics which I will talk on. But it's also an opportunity for our research community to come and ask questions of myself, and it kind of facilitates discussion around some of these kind of issues. I also join handover meetings with newly funded UKRI project teams. And so at those meetings, I will talk about the requirements for open access and research data management. And as a key tool that I use in those meetings, we've developed something called an expected publication schedule, which we provide to our academic teams, and we expect them to fill it out with all potential publications, pass that back to myself. I can then look over, and this would include long form and kind of short form publications. I can look over the different publishers, look at the different routes to compliance, and provide output by output advice to our researchers. And I think this works for us at the RCA because we're a smaller institution. It might not be something that there would be capacity for in terms of the quantity at larger institutions, but it's something that works well for us so far. We hope it will work in terms of the process of applying for funding for long form open access. And we've already sent one query off as a result of these schedules as well to UKRI.
So, long form open access, some of the things that Tom and I have been talking about is about, things like supporting third-party content and licensing. This could be tricky, particularly at a small institution like ours, where it is just Tom and I looking at open access primarily. We don't have anybody who's a specialist in third-party content as such. So it is very much trying to find our way. We've been piloting an internal open access fund for journal articles, not funded by UKRI, alongside our UKRI open access block grant that Tom and I work on together. We're considering a similar fund for long form publications, but the budget may not stretch far, given the high cost of BPCs and things like that. So these are some of the things we're discussing and piloting and trying to track to see if it's going to be feasible for us to continue in the future. And I'll let Tom go through the questions.
Yeah, so there's a few things that we still, we'll be interested to see how it develops, and maybe they're questions, maybe they're concerns. I don't know how we should frame it, really. One of the things that we're thinking about is the fact that we have a lot of researchers that often publish with smaller publishers, given the nature of the research that takes place at the RCA and the kind of venues that they find for dissemination. And these publishers don't always offer defined routes to open access, and some of them may not necessarily be aware of open access as a concept in the same way that larger publishers are. And I suppose our concern is that we don't want to harm the diversity of the publishing landscape, and we're not sure what researchers will do. If there aren't those defined routes on offer, will it mean that they're driven more to those larger publishers, and therefore as a consequence we're kind of reducing the diversity of publishers that are being engaged with? And we obviously don't want that to happen, and it's something that's of particular concern to us given the nature of the research at the RCA. I think Sherpa for Books has already been mentioned. That was something that we were hoping would be developed, and it'd be really interesting to see how that is implemented, because I think it's potentially something that could be very useful, and hopefully it's something that we can feed into as well, because just talking to the point that I mentioned before about the smaller publishers, if we can provide that kind of information where we engage with them, and then that is fed into that tool, that would be really useful as well, I think. We have some concerns about the fact that institutions might be having to cover BPCs up front. I think particularly for smaller institutions where budgets aren't always there, possibly having to do that could provide complications and issues. So it's just something that we want UKRI to be aware of, and hopefully there'll be routes to accommodate institutions that might have issues paying for that up front. We wonder how we're going to represent some of the sort of non-traditional publications in terms of formats and the mediums that some of our researchers publish in. We want to make sure that we can represent those effectively digitally and through open access routes. And as Christy said, we're also slightly concerned about some of the third-party copyright in terms of time and how that how we'll find time around finding permissions, making redactions, what the workflows will look like. We're already, I think, people that work at small institutions where you possibly, engaging with various different elements in your role, you're often already quite busy. And I think a lot of this might be pushed to us in library teams and in the research office. And I don't know where we'll have capacity or expertise necessarily. So it's something that we're certainly thinking about.
So thank you. Feel free to contact us if you've got any questions. And that's it from us.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Christy. And I think, yeah, some of the points you raise are really important issues. So, your points around the publishing landscape and bibliodiversity and also I suppose, ways in which to deal with third-party materials and everything. So I think, yeah, certainly there are complex issues that we need to be alert to and aware of. Perhaps some of this will be picked up in the panel later. So I would now like to welcome Matt Greenhall from the University of Liverpool to present from the University of Liverpool's perspective. Thank you very much, Matt, for joining us.
Not at all. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, colleagues. Oh, super. I can see that on screen. I can control these slides. Is that correct? Yeah, I can see that.
I believe you can.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. As Rachel says, I'm Matt Greenhall. I'm Director of Libraries, Museums and Galleries here at the University of Liverpool. And it's a pleasure to be able to speak today, and thanks for the invitation to talk. I am actually going to speak largely on behalf of my colleague, Martin Wolfe, who is Head of Open Research here at Liverpool and who has prepared these slides. But unfortunately, Martin can't be with us today. But Martin has worked with myself and other colleagues within the university to effectively start implementing some processes in place to help us prepare for the implementation of the policy. So I'll talk through those now. So areas that I'm going to cover in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk a bit about the university's approach so far to supporting open access monographs as some context. I'll talk about some of the specific work that we've been doing to prepare for implementation of the policy and the work that the policy will kickstart for us. And then I'm going to finish with a few reflections in regards to open access monographs beyond the UKRI policy, some of which have been touched on a bit already. So to start with that first topic, what approaches we've taken so far around OA long form publications. There's really been two separate areas or two different approaches that I would and Martin would flag in terms of our approach to date. Firstly is the process of acquiring or supporting open access long form content that is produced by others outside of the university. And then secondly, the approaches we've taken to directly support the publication of OA books authored by University of Liverpool researchers. So to start with the first. So in terms of acquiring content and supporting open access monographs by non-University of Liverpool authors. Like many others, many of you on this call, we as an institution contribute to unlocking schemes where contents meet our researchers' needs. So, for example, we'll invest in a particular knowledge on latch subject collection to secure open access if possible, where it meets the research or teaching requirements of our colleagues here within the university. We're sponsors or members of a small number of relevant schemes or services. So, for example, we're a supporter member of Open Book Publishers. And these activities have primarily been supported by our standard acquisition budgets, hence why it's been really important for us to show the benefit and to be able to demonstrate how these resources and our payment and provision of them directly support the research and teaching ambitions and needs of the university. But the second area I referred to is when it comes to directly supporting OA publication of books authored by University of Liverpool researchers. And there's a number of approaches that we've taken to support this. Firstly is a series of pilot projects. We've taken part in a number of these, including with Liverpool University Press, who were referenced earlier. And LUP is an independent organisation which is not subsidised by the university. So it's associated with, but sits separately from the university. And we work really closely with LUP. And one of the projects we've worked with them on is called Open Goal, which was looking at the process and the mechanics involved in publishing open access monographs. In particular, this pilot project supported the publication of the first monographs of 2 of our recently graduated postgraduate research students. And it was a really valuable project to learn about the processes involved in publishing a monograph more generally, but specifically on an open access basis. In addition to these pilot projects, we've also supported the publication of individual OA books, where we have supported and made payments to enable academics or researchers to publish their monograph on an OA basis. And we've done this with a mixture of budgets and on really quite an ad hoc case-by-case basis. And it's been a relatively limited number, around a dozen we've supported through this process. Now, although we've supported these on a case-by-case basis, and that's brought some benefits in allowing us to meet the bespoke needs of individual researchers, we've since developed more of a consistent criteria regarding how we fund open access long-form publications like this and the decision points around them. We've made the decision that we will only fund fully open access books from our institutional open access fund, which the library administers, with fully gold open access publishers. Although this does restrict the range and variety of publishers that we're able to publish with, it is a very clear and consistent message to our academics and also aligns with our approach around journal articles. So this is what we have done to date. So in terms of preparing for the implementation of the policy, this policy provides us with an opportunity to review what we're doing and look at our monograph and long-form publication strategies. And there are a few things that we've encountered along the way in starting this process over the last few months. Firstly, we know that there were a few misunderstandings that initially arose during the summer, not just in Liverpool, but elsewhere, that we needed to start building in the costs for OA publications of long-form publications within grants now. Colleagues not being aware or quite understanding the two-step process, or believing or suspecting that the monies allocated within the UKRI policy, the 3.5 million, were insufficient. So they should therefore put the costs of publications of outputs within their grant application. Obviously, this is not the case. We've addressed some of those queries earlier in today's webinar. And this is something we batted back quickly. But we have been somewhat limited in our messaging and our ability to message around the processes of the policy until really today with some of the new information that's been released. And we've been grateful to receive this today. And we're certainly ready with our communications plan to start communicating more comprehensively with our academics regarding some of the processes involved. But what we have been able to do is over the summer, we produced a working calculation of the likely number of annual eligible outputs that Liverpool will produce that would fall within the remit of the policy. And therefore, we also were able to estimate the annual costs of these if we were going down a BPC route alone. So if we're solely paying BPCs, based on the average BPCs that we pay, we've been able to estimate the annual cost of estimated publications under the policy. Now, I should say immediately, it is our hope that we will not be going down a purely BPC route. And as we've touched on, and colleagues at Jisc have just been speaking around Diamond and other options, we want to use the opportunity of the policy as a real opportunity to advocate for other forms of OA publication for monographs beyond the BPC model. But what we did with this information is that we were able to go to the university's senior leadership team and made a successful case for the creation of what we've termed a rolling fund. This is a rolling fund to be held by the library, through which we will make payments for BPCs under the policy, and also into which reimbursements from UKRI will come in time. So there's a rolling fund that will be held alongside our open access funds. And I acknowledge what colleagues said in the previous presentation. We're fortunate to be able to do this and recognise that not all institutions will be able to create such a fund to enable the payment of BPCs in advance and then receive reimbursements. So these are the preparations that we've done in advance of the policy, but we also face a few outstanding issues. First of all, our systems, particularly our financial systems, don't work particularly well with notions of rolling funds and the commitment of costs, possibly years in advance of the actual payment of costs associated with the publication of long-form outputs. This brings some accounting challenges in terms of committing funds, paying funds, and then receiving reimbursement of funds over multiple financial years, and that's something we are working on. We've built a communications plan with our target audiences, what we want to know, what we want them to do, but the completion and launch of this communication plan has really relied on some of the information that we've heard today. So we haven't really been able to comprehensively communicate yet how the policy will work in reality to our committees and to our individual academics, but we'll be doing that shortly. We want to use the policy's launch as a real opportunity to advocate for other forms of open access beyond the BPC model, especially Diamond. And something that Martin's flagged in terms of some of the discussions he's had is modelling how this might work in reality. And in terms of the available open access Diamond platforms, which we just heard from Jisc colleagues, and also the scalability of this and the attractiveness of this to our academics. And so we will be wanting to advocate for this. And I put this before hearing what's just been presented, a significant issue that we were aware of, which may not in fact come to pass in the way that we once imagined, was if there was a significant shortfall between the upper limit in terms of BPC payments offered by UKRI and that which we are being charged by publishers. So that is something that we were aware of and we flagged as a potential financial liability as well within the institution. So that is what we've done and been doing over the summer. And I say we're now going to ramp up very much our communications following today. A few general reflections around OA monographs that Martin wanted me to reflect on. Like everyone, and as we've heard, REF is on everyone's mind. We're waiting to hear what the OA requirements for monographs might be in place of the next REF, but the messaging that we've been given to our academics is that we're expecting these that they won't be any stricter than the UKRI requirements. So there'll be parity or maybe less stringent. And that's been, I think, confirmed with what we've heard today. Like many of you, we need to strike a balance in the use of our funds to support platforms and initiatives to make other people's work available on an OA basis versus using our funds to support OA publishing by our own researchers. So there is a balance between access and publication. and that our preference is to avoid a purely BPC approach. And I think there's general consensus across the sector of that, and that we can use this as an opportunity to advocate for other forms of open access long form publication. One thing that Martin has flagged, and we've discussed this at various points, is that in terms of BPCs, whether these are more justifiable than obviously APCs, reflecting the very high level of the higher level of editorial input around monographs. But I know there will be a lot of potential opinions around that, and I'm sure that might come up in the panel discussion. Finally, I've mentioned this a few times, we want to use this as an opportunity to really advocate for the various routes for open access long form publication. The policy and its implementation is an opportunity for us to do that. We will be having events and initiatives from now onwards, and particularly in the spring of next year, we'll be hosting a symposium, it'll be hybrid, on the future of the monograph, to which all of you would be very welcome to attend. It will include Rachel, who will be speaking from UKRI, and also Christopher Smith, the Executive Chair of AHRC, will be speaking at that as well. So that's a real opportunity for us, whether academics, publishers, funders, or information professionals, to consider what the future of the monograph might hold. And I will stop there. So thank you very much. Contact details on screen.
Thank you very much, Matt and Martin, of course. Yeah, the symposium sounds, I think, very relevant, and especially seeing all of the conversations in the chat, and people seem to want to have discussions about many of the issues that there are around this change to open access. So I am now pleased to introduce Dr. Claire Brock from the University of Leicester. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. Apologies for the slides, they appear to have come out backwards, so
oh dear. Okay.
So hopefully you'll be able to see them the right way, and that
and they look all right here. Yeah,
good stuff. So this is just my experience of open access, and I suppose I was quite an early example of the open access applied to arts and humanities, because I was funded by the Wellcome Trust. So I received a Research Leave Award for a project on women surgeons and their patients in Britain between 1860 and 1918 back in 2012, and that was held between 2012 and 2014. And this resulted in the monograph that you can see on the left-hand side, which I submitted to Cambridge University Press that year. Now, as I had received Wellcome Trust funding, I knew from the very beginning that whatever I produced during this grant in terms of publications would need to be published open access. So I was aware from the very start that this would need to be worked out. And I knew that monographs would also be part of that particular remit. During my grant, I actually managed to publish an article open access. So I did have some experience from the start of publishing open access, but obviously a monograph is a very different thing. Just to run through a few of the benefits that I felt that I received from publishing open access, and perhaps to remove some of the myths that might be apparent about open access publication too. My book was published both in hardback in February 2017 and gold open access almost immediately afterwards. And quite incredibly, it even paperbacked. So it's not exactly the result that people fear, that perhaps open access will lead to a lack of actual physical books. But this is a wonderful achievement. I was really pleased to learn that paperbacks don't disappear just because you have open access. So really, my work is available in 3 different formats at the moment, which is great. My open access monograph has 13,000 full text views at the moment around that point. It also has a worldwide reach because this is all tracked. So Twitter X suggests that the work has been viewed and discussed across Britain, the EU, North America, South America, Africa, and Australasia. So it has an incredibly wide reach. Given the title, as you can see, is pretty focused and pretty specific, but it seems to have attracted a deal of attention across the world, which is great. In terms of the demographic, as you can see, I've just lifted these statistics from CUP's website, and it's great to see that the public domain has received 68% of the downloads of this particular monograph. Scientists, 11%, healthcare practitioners, 10%, and science communicators, 10%. So it's had a really, really wide viewing platform there on CUP's website. In terms of the institutional research environment, what's rather wonderful is that because this was quite a rare example of early open access, my institution was able to use it as a notable example, and obviously a quite rare one, in the 2021 environment statement. It was described as a major outcome which enhanced quality, distinctiveness, and the visibility of research outputs. So it gives you a sense of the benefits of open access for the institution in that sense, as well as the individual. And also the public events that have stemmed from my work being just a lot more visible to the general public. So, for example, I've spoken at the Royal College of Physicians about women and dissent, and more recently I've been working with a theatre company to explore women medics and their patients at this point as well. And this has really helped to make this a much more visible piece of work. So this is from our REF environment statement. Such interventions have helped to make the general public and the medical profession more conscious of how women fought for equality and contributed to medical and surgical developments, and an ongoing discussion that we still have now. So those are my brief examples of what open access has done for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting to hear that perspective. And we now have Joanna Page from the University of Cambridge. Joanna.
Hi, everybody. I've been asked to speak as well about my personal experience as an author of publishing books on open access, and I'm very happy to do that. So 5 of the monographs that I've published have been with open access agreements. Some of these have been with publishers that work entirely in that way, others with more traditional presses that have open access schemes in operation for some titles. So I'm going to start by saying something about why I started publishing open access, then how I went about it, and I'll talk end by talking about some of the benefits that I think it has brought, and some of those will echo some of Claire's points there. So I've never actually had a funder require me to publish open access, but I'm a Latin Americanist. And my principal motivation for publishing books on open access has been to make them accessible to readers in Latin America. Buying books can be very expensive in Latin American countries for several reasons, including the very high cost of importing books. So compared to many researchers in Latin America, my position at a UK research-intensive institution gives me huge advantages in relation to the access that I have to ebooks and other materials. So I wanted to do what I could to reduce that difference in whatever small way I've been able to. Of course, it's a very small drop in an ocean of inequality when it comes to access, but it felt to me to be the right way forward. I was also very struck by an article I read about academic publishing years ago in a UK newspaper, which called upon more senior academics to blaze a trail in opting for open access publishers in order to change perceptions, really, that those publishers are somehow less prestigious or less rigorous, to make it more possible for younger scholars to follow that path. At that time, I didn't really consider myself to be particularly senior, but I was in a permanent established post, and I felt that I was able to respond to that call. So my first 2 experiences with publishing open access monographs were with university presses in North America. Neither of them actually had an advertised open access scheme, but I'd contacted them really just out of the blue to ask about the possibility of publishing open access. And it turned out that both had new schemes that they were setting up, and I was able to publish with those. And for the other 3 books, I went with open access publishers in the UK. As we all know, open access publishing generally gives free access to readers, but of course, what's happening is that many publishers are now simply transferring those costs to the author. That sets up another series of inequalities that I'm very aware of. So that's why I've in fact chosen to publish with presses that either don't charge book processing fees at all, or have exemptions in place. I've not had access myself to grants for book publishing in the past, but I've never needed to pay an author's fee. From my experience, it's always worth asking about open access and about fee waivers, even if the publisher doesn't list these as options. So twice, as I've mentioned, I've simply gone to a publisher and said, I'd really like to publish a monograph with you, but I only publish open access. And amazingly, they've responded to say, okay, we can make that work. Or even if they've asked for author fees up front, again, it's worth asking if there's any flexibility. And I've been really surprised to find that often there is. So what was the publishing experience like? I would say exactly the same as with a traditional monograph. But in the case of the UK open access publishers, at least, it was significantly quicker. So there was the same process of submitting a book proposal that went out to external reviewers, then a book contract, then the usual peer review process on the full manuscript. But with both of the UK open access presses that I've worked with, the whole process was much quicker. Usually, in fact, there were only 6 months between submitting the revised manuscript and the book coming out. And that's not because there was any cutting of corners with the copy editing process or the cover design or anything like that. They just seemed to be more efficient. So there were a lot of other benefits for me. The first is that my books have been downloaded by, I think, many more people than if I'd published them via a more conventional route. Obviously, a book downloaded is not the same as a book read, but I'm sure that my research is reaching a larger number of readers as a result of being on open access. I believe that the readership is also more diverse. With the last book I published, I can actually access my own user data, and that tracks how many people have read the book, but also interestingly in which country in the world they're based in. Another real benefit for me is that other people have very readily joined in the marketing efforts. I find it much less embarrassing to share about a new book on social media because I'm not asking anyone to buy it. I'm just letting them know that they can download it for free. So it feels more about providing a benefit than launching some kind of self-publicity campaign. So lots of people then share my post, usually under the title free book. So you can easily see how much further it reaches as a result. Another advantage I found is that the book never goes out of print. And there was also no limit on the number of full color images that I could use and no additional cost for including them. In all cases, a paperback version is available at a reasonable price for those that wish to buy it. And it's usually printed on demand, but there's often no more than a 2 to 3 day delay in delivering. And just to add, because this may be a question that some people have, I don't feel that going with open access publishers, including with some that are less well known, although not all of them have fallen into that category, I don't feel that that has had any negative effects at all on how my publishing record has been evaluated, for example, for promotion purposes. So that's a short overview of my personal experience in publishing open access, but I'd be really happy to answer questions later in the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Joanna. That's really interesting to hear about your experience. So we are due to take a break, and quite a long break. So we reconvene at 1:30. And at that point, we will have a panel discussion where we can take questions to all the speakers. I just really want to thank all of the speakers, though, before lunch. They were all really interesting perspectives and gave a nice broad range of different, I suppose, views and approaches, issues, concerns, and, you know, opportunities in this whole space. So thank you. And I also just would like to note that I realise that there's been some really helpful links posted in the chat to resources that organisations have been producing. And I will acknowledge now that I also really appreciate that there are some aspects of information that we are sharing at this event that ideally we would have shared earlier. In particular, obviously the funding levels and the particular application approach around, you know, the system that we were using. So, you know, I just want to say that very much appreciate those issues. Hopefully the 9-month bedding in period will help. We will get further information out and summaries, and yeah, no, they're all really helpful, the links that people have shared. So if we reconvene at 1:30, then there'll be the opportunity to have a panel discussion and ask questions of the panel members. And then after that session is when we also go into the more open discussion groups, where we can have broader discussions, and as I say, those won't be actually recorded. So thank you very much and have a nice lunch break. Thank you, everyone.